Hello everybody, it's Melanie, and I hope you've been enjoying Katya's lesson so far. And she's touched oxides, and I wanted to talk a little bit about them today because they're so interesting and perhaps clear up some things and help you do this assignment. So first of all, I wanted to say that we usually, when we talk about oxides, it's about 1,8-cineole because it's the most frequent one that is shown in essential oils. So we'll look at him. And another one we usually talk about and find in, for example, German chamomile or blue chamomile, however you call it, it's bisabolol oxide, and that one is quite different. So let's look at that one first. So I'll search for chamomile. Here we go. In Dropsmith we call it blue chamomile, but if you type in here German chamomile, it will come up the same. We had to agree on some name, and my specialists, they decided this is the one we should use. So don't get confused. Also, the same thing is with the Latin names. Whichever one you type in, you will find your oil you're looking for. We have synonyms in our database, so don't worry about that. Okay, so we click at the blue chamomile, and what we are interested in are chemical components, and today we're talking about oxides. So here they are, and you see right away we have monoterpene and sesquiterpene oxides in this particular chamomile. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, is that at 1,8-cineole it's a monoterpene oxide, while our bisabolol oxide, it's a sesquiterpene oxide. So here you can see just from that classification that bisabolol oxide is a bigger molecule, which gives it a different smell and some other properties and reactions a little bit different than the monoterpene oxides. Also, I wanted to show you that depending on the GCMS we got from the distributors, depends on how we defined this area here. So in this report, they defined it as alpha bisabolol oxide A and B and C. So when you're going to search for that, if you just put bisabolol oxide, you will not find this particular oil, just so you're aware of that. And also, our research is then depending on which one we're talking about, because they are not, sometimes it's not the same thing. So just to make you aware of these things. But let's look at, I want to look at cineole because that is the one we most frequently find in essential oils. And I wanted to look with you a little bit if we can find some similarities and differences, and just something, perhaps a new insight into oils that have a larger percent of 1,8-cineole in their composition. So here in the filter, I will type in 1,8-cineole. So you choose it here, just make sure you clicked it, just so it's all how it should be. And today we're going to look at all oils that have over 25%. Let's see how many we'll find. So we found at this moment today 23 different essential oils that have over 25% of 1,8-cineole. And take a look at them, and if you have been practicing aromatherapy for a while, you're probably smiling because you know that these oils have some similar properties, and they tend to be how would you say, more energizing than oils that do not have 1,8-cineole. So let's just take a couple and compare them. So I'll take this row here and just compare them to see if I can get some new ideas, insights, and what does that tell me. So as you see, I chose 4 different ones because they have quite different chemistry. Just by looking at the colors, you can see that they're very colorful and different in their composition, but they all do have a lot of 1,8-cineole. So let's see, I'm curious in their application in their traditional use actually today. Let's look at that. Because if you want to see the properties, then maybe you're more interested in looking at properties of 1,8 cineole when we're talking about 1,8 cineole. But I want to see how 1,8 cineole affects the whole composition of oil, if it does, and if I can see this by comparing oils that are similar. So right away, we all know that we usually use 1,8 cineole for respiratory conditions. So see, 3 of these are usually for asthma and bronchitis. So another thing that you'll usually find is, it gives, sometimes it gives just clarity, just for mental clarity, for focus. And here we have that as, for example, exhaustion. So see physical and mental exhaustion, or here we have emotional exhaustion by a different author. So just compare these things and see if they give you, if they do add up or not. And here you see they're all 4 of them are used for infections. So here you'll get different references on different ideas on people who actually suggest to use it for infections and which infections. They're quite good repellents usually, because 1,8 cineole is a repellent, and here you go, all 3 of them found to be useful as repellents. So this is something I wanted you to do for an assignment. Perhaps it will give you a new insight of how these oils are similar or not, and why not. Look at the whole chemistry. What does that tell you? Then you compare with the properties of the chemical components as opposed to properties of the whole essential oil. What does that tell you? And then you just learn a little bit more about the oils you're using. Also, I wanted to point out that safety here is also quite similar, you will see, and that is probably because of the 1,8 cineole content, which is quite strong and should be used with care. But Katya has also mentioned a little bit on synergy, so I want to look at that. So let's choose one of these oils and just look at how does chemical composition and classifying chemical components into groups, does that help us, and how we can use this in our practice. So here's our myrtle. It's a lovely oil I like to use. And let's look at chemical components again. And what I wanted to show is, here we talked about classification into groups, and as Katya said, it can really tell us more about, because these groups tend to undergo similar reactions, it can tell us about their reactivity and oxidation, which is useful for knowing some things about perhaps shelf life. See, this one has a lot of monoterpenes, so that will tell me that it might oxidate quickly, so I will take care of this oil a little bit more shelf life wise, I guess. It also probably, first thing I would smell is these monoterpenes, so I would get this light high note that will come into my nose first, but then as you see, it does have some sesquiterpenes and esters, which tend to be middle to lower notes, so it does have more stability than, for example, a lemon, which is almost all just monoterpenes. And also here we have a lot of monoterpene oxides, which I presume is 1,8 cineole, which has an intense smell. So this is a quite well-rounded smell-wise. So and this is all information I got just by looking at the chemical groups themselves. Also, the groups will tell me about this solubility, so that might be interesting when I'm choosing an oil for a product. And looking at the size of the molecules there in this oil, it might tell me about the skin penetration and safety and sensitization. So this is all just a rough idea of this oil can provide for me, or which things I have to pay a little more attention to. But of course, this is just a very not precise idea of the oil, I guess, especially property-wise. I would always advise you to look at single components and then their synergy. So for example, what I wanted to point out is although synergy is not predictable, knowing how much of these components actually add up to antifungal property, it does give me more confidence into why I'm using the soil for antifungal infection, for example, because I do have some data, some research I can back up my choice with. So although synergy is not predictable, I do have to start somewhere. So this is a great start. And by looking at this, I wanted to show you that although yes, we have a lot of alpha pinene and 1,8 cineole here that is antifungal, and it makes up a lot of a big chunk of the oil. Although it's very important, all these little guys here that help it add up to a higher percentage. So I just wanted to point out that I always look at the essential oil as a whole, holistically, because all little bits and pieces that are in there are quite important and adding up to the final synergy of the oil. So I like to look at properties of chemical components and then compare that to the properties of the essential oil as a whole that we found. And see, with myrtle we have quite a lot that we can look at, and this will give me really a very broad and wide knowledge about this particular essential oil, and then I can use it really with a sense of confidence and just have a lot of things to back up my choices, I guess. I like to always know why I'm using a certain oil and why I chose it, especially when I work with clients or in medical care. It's very important to back up your choices. So I hope this video was useful for you and it will help you to look further into oils and enjoy the assignment. And if you have any questions, let us know below the video. Let us know how you enjoyed it. Was it useful? I'd love to see your comments. Perhaps you have some more insight into it and how I would really like to know how you will use this information and Dropsmith in your practice. And just I'm curious about how you feel about this whole e-course as well. So have a beautiful day ahead, and hope you've been enjoying the lessons. Bye bye.